Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for Parent University as we discuss how we can support our children who may experience complex feelings about school and attending school. This evening, Dr. Laura Kohler from Endeavor Health Linden Oaks will share from avoidance to attendance, helping kids face school anxiety with confidence. Dr. Kohler will identify some common reasons behind school refusal and share concrete strategies for addressing these concerns at home. At the end of the presentation, a panel of Indian Prairie School District 204 staff members from all levels will answer the questions that were submitted in the registration. Questions can also be submitted tonight in the chat. Please welcome Dr. Kohler.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'll just jump right in and we'll start talking about school anxiety. And so like Dawn was saying, the goals for tonight is that we're going to talk about some common reasons behind school refusal, understand how avoidance actually can maintain school anxiety, and then learn some concrete strategies as well. All right, so we'll just start off with what is school anxiety. So in general, school refusal is not defiance. It's an avoidance driven by distress. So I often like to look at school anxiety or school refusal as like an iceberg. And there's some, you might have seen pictures like this before. With emotions, and I think it can work the same way. That some of the behaviors that we see from school anxiety and school refusal are really just like the tip of the iceberg. And so, what you might be seeing is something like a tantrum or being selectively mute or crying, and a lot of the times, what's kind of underneath the surface are all these other things that's really like the cause of the school anxiety and refusal. Anxiety is typically the most common cause of school refusal, which is what we're going to focus on today. And so in general, anxiety and fear serves to motivate and protect us from harm or unpleasant consequences. And so with that, if you kind of look at this picture with this iceberg, those are all unpleasant consequences. And sometimes in the moment, it can, we can worry that we're going to be harmed. Like it's that saying that like hindsight's 2020, when we kind of look back at maybe a situation that happened at school, we know that there was no danger, that there was no like really fear of being harmed. But if you think of a little one who's 7, 8, 9, even teenagers too, you don't always know that, especially when it comes to like bullying or if you feel like you're getting in trouble. And so this anxiety and fear sort of perks up anytime that something happens where we feel that something kind of negative or bad is going to happen. The anxiety sort of perks up and is like, let me take a look at this and let's see if this is something that's going to be harmful or even give an unpleasant consequence. And so really at the end of the day, school refusal is a coping strategy. Avoidance is a coping strategy. So it's an unhelpful one. We want to look at it as being just an unhelpful one, but it's still a form of coping. And it brings that short-term relief, which is a lot of the times what the anxiety is focused on is just how can I make my person sort of feel more comfortable, feel safer. And so then the anxiety says, I have a suggestion. Let's not go. Let's not go to class. Let's not go to school that day. And it's just this idea that the anxiety part of our brain is giving that we don't necessarily have to listen to. And that's one of the things we'll talk a little bit about is how can we teach our kids, to not always look at the anxiety and do what it says, that it's just an idea that it's coming up with. So we just want to look at school refusal as a coping mechanism, just like everything else that often happens when something comes up. So like we talked about with just a minute ago, some of the common reasons for school anxiety and refusal. Anxieties, the most common one, so possibly like fear of separation, social anxiety, performance or test. Lots of different kinds of symptoms often show up with anxiety. And so those symptoms sometimes then can be really uncomfortable. So the most common ones that we see are like stomach aches and headaches, or probably the two that we see the most at Linden Oaks are those two. And the mind says, I have a stomach ache, I'm sick, I shouldn't go to school. So the anxiety almost can trick us a little bit and kind of give us a symptom that we're like, see, you don't go to school when you have a stomach ache. And so we really need to make sure that we're kind of creating some boundaries around that, and when do we stay home from school and when do we go. So oftentimes we sort of look at, if you have a fever, if you have something contagious like pink eye or something like that, stomach aches isn't always a reason to not go to school. And then we really want to look at kind of what the rest of the day looks like. So, if the stomach ache's happening in the morning and then we're not seeing so much of the stomach ache later, that's a pretty good guess then that was probably a school anxiety related thing. And there's a purpose for all of that too. And so every symptom that comes up with anxiety, there's a purpose because of that fight or flight system that often turns on, because the anxiety is like, is there something going on here that's not safe? Should we run? Should we fight? Should we freeze? So then we get these symptoms in our bodies, so then we can get ready to do that. So for example, like the stomach ache happens because our body's trying to turn all of our resources to our arms and our legs so we can run away or fight. The problem is that if it's let's say the next one, a pressure to perform perhaps, or a test or a presentation, there isn't anything to actually fight or run away from. So then our bodies just kind of have this leftover sensations in our body because all these resources are going to arms and legs and not our stomach. And so then things that our body starts to slow down processes that we don't need to run away or fight. And so then things like digestion slows down, which is what gives us the stomach ache so quickly. So if your child has, or yourself even, have anxiety and those symptoms, there's a cause for every single one of them. And that there's a purpose, and that's a way that we can kind of hopefully see the anxiety again as just this advisor for us that we can either listen to or not. Depression or low motivation can also cause some school refusal. Fatigue and irritability, this idea of like, what's the point? And then what can happen is then if they're feeling that low motivation and what's the point, and they don't go for a few days, now they're behind in some schoolwork or not sure what people are going to say. And then the anxiety comes on top of that often. Some academic or executive functioning challenges. So, maybe there's some like poor organization or missing some schoolwork, having a hard time remembering, things like that. Peer issues, so like bullying or feeling left out. So then they might avoid areas like lunch or recess, that there's groups of people, a big change in a peer connection. There's a lot of research out there that shows like belonging is very closely tied to that fight or flight. And if we feel like we don't belong, that can feel then, if we feel like we're being like ostracized from the group, or that we're not connecting, that there's some evolutionary ties to humans wanting connection. And then if we don't have that, it can feel like that very fearful fight or flight can kind of kick in when that happens. Some sensory or environmental stress. So if it's very loud or noisy, oftentimes like hallways can get very busy during passing period and lots going on. Assemblies can be very loud in the gym if there's like a band or an orchestra, music playing, lots of people, and that can feel very overwhelming for some people. And also like family or life stressors can also, any kind of changes at home or any kind of conflict or things like that can also then start to kind of pull in then to the entire day. And the same thing, can happen in reverse too. If some of these things are happening, if there's some peer issues at school, then that can start to affect stuff at home as well. So lots of reasons. I think that's what's tough about school refusal and anxiety and why it's coming up so much, because as this isn't even an exhaustive list, and there's so many reasons why kids would refuse to go to school. And really, because typically when the struggle, when things start to happen in our lives, a lot of the times our functioning, the things that we're just doing, our social role on a daily basis gets affected. And for kids, school's like the number one for that. For adults it might be more like work, or even like household cleaning, things like that, but for kids it's typically school and homework a lot of the times. So those are some common reasons, but again, there's a lot more. Okay. So what happens if we avoid then those all of those things? So there's that big list, and oftentimes what happens is this avoidant loop that can happen, and this short-term fix that actually ends up keeping the anxiety strong. So, in a situation where we might face a challenge, the anxiety again kind of perks up. Let that challenge could be anything from that list we just had. So, a peer conflict, a test, maybe all of a sudden there's a new teacher in the room, or a new kid in the room that's louder, or something like that. The anxiety kind of perks up and is feeling threatened, feeling that the person, that I'm going to be unsafe. And so your first instinct is to pull back, right? That fight or flight kicks in. And it's like, oh, what are we going to have to run? Or are we going to have to fight this? And oftentimes, if we sort of listen to that, then the anxiety is making the decision on how we respond to challenges, not sort of our whole person, which is what we want. Only, the anxiety is only one little part of our brain, and we really want the whole kind of body to do it. So, sometimes I have a son, he's 10. And so some of the way that I talk about it with my son is when he's making decisions, his name's Jake. And so I might say something like, is that Jake making that decision? Or is that like your anxiety making that decision, or your sadness making that decision, or even like your boredom? My son tends to get bored. And so then his mind is like, we got to do something, versus just sometimes being still. And so I want Jake, the whole being of Jake, all the aspects of his brain to make this decision, not the anxiety. But if we're in this avoidant loop, and we're facing this challenge, anxiety makes the decision. Then with the way we respond, then when it shows up, is we escape, we avoid, we do something that brings us quick relief, perhaps like an unhelpful, unhealthy coping strategy. So maybe like self-harm, using substances, aggression, throwing things. But the anxiety is just going to start throwing out ideas to try to get what it wants. And then oftentimes something happens and it works. So then the immediate outcome is that the minute perhaps, a parent, or even like us at Linden Oaks sometimes might say, okay, well, if you're, we've talked about 10 different ways to get you into group, and maybe you're not going, or maybe not going to school. So, fine, you can go home. That anxiety immediately goes down often. And so then the brain says, I like this feeling. This is a good feeling. Like, I feel calmer. This is released. Yes. I want that more. And so then that's then how the avoidance gets reinforced, because the brain is focused solely on that release and relief and comfort, not values, not how we want to show up, not how we want to live our lives. And so then that avoidance just starts to get reinforced, and that cycle starts to continue. So then the long-term effects, the short-term, is that anxiety drops and we feel that relief. But then often the long-term effect is confidence and distress tolerance shrinks. So things we used to be able to manage and deal with, we no longer can. And then it can often, sometimes we can accidentally teach ourselves, or possibly teach others, maybe you can't do it, and that's not at all what we often as adults believe. We 100% believe they can do it, but sometimes if we let them stay home, especially younger ones, their little brains might think, yeah, see, like my adults in my world don't think I can do it either, and they think I should stay home, when that's often not the reason why why we let kids stay home. So the avoidant behavior then becomes more stronger and just automatic. So then the anxiety, the next time we face a challenge, the anxiety kind of pushes through everything else and is like, I got this. I took care of it last time. I'm going to take care of it again. I do sort of picture a little bit in my mind, like Inside Out. If you guys have seen that movie, I picture it a little bit like that. That the anxiety kind of comes up and says, "I know what to do. We just don't go." Or I know what to do. I throw things. The last time I threw things, my parents let me stay home. So then that avoidance brings that short-term relief, but often long-term limitations, things that we never even knew was going to happen. And really what this does is that we never then become resilient is really what this is. So that's what we're going to talk about next. So then that's the avoidance loop. So then the approach loop, right? Avoidance means that like I'm pulling away, I'm not doing, and I'm avoiding the situation. So then the opposite of that is approaching it. And that's what builds resilience and confidence is the approaching part. So then when we're faced with a challenge, that anxiety still shows up the same way. Maybe there's a peer conflict, a test. The challenge is exactly the same. The anxiety is still going to perk up and say, I don't know about this. Let's not do this. You might embarrass yourself. You don't want to embarrass yourself. So let's go ahead and leave, class. And let's say we have a stomach ache, so we get to go home. But instead of turning away, our values, that whole Jake makes the decision. That the values make the decision on how to respond to that challenge. So then you stay with the discomfort. How we respond to it is that we stay with the discomfort. We use coping skills to ride that emotional wave so that we can survive that emotional wave. And then it's helpful to remind yourself that the discomfort is temporary and we can survive it. And so then the immediate outcome often is that, that anxiety is going to rise. It will, but then it naturally fades. And so then we get a sense of pride and a sense of mastery, and that we actually learn that we can handle hard things, that we can do hard things. And then what gets reinforced from that is that then every time we face a challenge that's hard and we practice our skills and we keep moving forward, then we'll get more courageous, and the effort and moving towards values are actually what's reinforced. So we're sort of like, thanks anxiety. That's a strategy we use at Linden Oaks. Is just like, thanks anxiety. That's absolutely an idea. I could walk out of the classroom. I could, refuse and stay home, but that's not all of what I want to do, because I want to see my friends. I'll just keep using my son as an example. Like he has coding club on Tuesdays, and he has trombone practice on Mondays. If he wants to do those things, he has to be willing to then to go to school. So it's more than just if he had to give some presentation, let's say he was really anxious about, or if he had separation anxiety from me, it's all of the things. He wants to see his friends. There's so many things that he wants to do there. So then the long-term effects are then the confidence, the self-trust, the emotional resilience grows. And so then what ends up happening is that we expand our comfort zone. So with the avoidance loop, we shrink it. So then, I'm only willing to do these things, these things that maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most anxiety, I'm only willing to do things where maybe I feel like a 1, 2, and a 3, and that's it. Where if we do this approach loop, we're just going to keep expanding to where then really there could be nothing that gets in our way, which is what we want, right? We don't want any barrier for our kids to get in the way of them living a full and meaningful life, the life that they want. So in order for them that to happen, they need to start practicing now all the little things, all the skills, the ways to kind of survive situations. I know that might sound a little intense, but emotions can feel really uncomfortable. And sometimes the thing, whatever the thing is, will happen. You might embarrass yourself doing a presentation. You might not be picked at recess to be able to, play whatever game they're playing. Those things can happen, and to be able to work through them is actually going to help build resilience and be able to then know that for the rest of my life, like, I got this because I've been doing it for they're 15 years old. Let's say I've been doing this for the last 15 years. I've got this. I can keep going. So then what happens the next time the anxiety comes up, because it will, we approach it with more tools, skills, more willingness, more courage. And so then over time, again, the values, we use this word values, just as a kind of a single word to be able to describe just what is important to you. I don't want anxiety making this decision. I want your values as a term. You can use whatever, word sort of works with your family. But with the type of therapy that I do, values is the big piece of that. Or again, like the whole Jake kind of making that decision. But full and meaningful life. What does that look like? And I don't think you're ever too young. I think you can start talking about those things immediately. I think you talk about family values. How does this family want to show up to things? We want to show up that we're committed and loyal. If you sign up for something, we're going to stick it out for the season. It doesn't mean you have to do it the rest of your life, but we're going to stick it out for the season. Things like that. Those kind of things has happened to my son a little bit. Sometimes he thinks practice is a little boring and he just wants to get to the game. But, we signed up for something. We made a commitment to our team, and we're gonna stick through it because we can do hard things, and we can do those. And then after the season, we don't have to keep going, things like that. So then we have these full conversations about our values and what we as a family, as well as then trying to help Jake, kind of identify his own values even outside of us a little bit. Hopefully this is all making sense. So some of the skills. So this STOP skill is from dialectical behavioral therapy. That's the kind of therapy that we do at Linden Oaks in the anxiety and OCD programs, is where I work. And so this STOP skill is a framework that you can use as parents as well as kids can use to help try to interrupt that avoidance loop that naturally is going to come. We all do it. I still do it sometime 45, and I still do this sometimes, where my anxiety is still like, do you want to do that? If someone asked me to do a presentation in front of like 500 people, I guarantee you my anxiety is going to be like, are you sure you want to do that? And so with this, it's the acronym STOP. So it's a way to help us remember this, to do this. I practice this skill. And so the first one, the S actually stands for stop. We don't react, we freeze, we don't move a muscle, because we don't want that anxiety making that decision for us. And so we just kind of pause for a second, take a step back. And so the best way I think to do that is to do a breathing activity, a breathing exercise, or even just take a deep breath. Give some space between that anxiety giving you that urge, or the urge to run away or to start throwing things, things like that. Let's take a deep breath. Take a step back, because it's really hard. If we're just reacting really fast, we need that minute. We need that minute to even investigate what the urge is, because because a stop skill. I could do the same. If we were doing a presentation on impulsivity right now, I would still this exact slide would probably be there, because I think the stop skill can also help with impulsivity. And so then we need to observe what's going on. My son struggles with this a little bit. We have to investigate feelings, urges, thoughts, what's happening on the inside, what's happening on the outside. But to make effective choices, so that full and meaningful life, we have to know what's going on, so we need to stop. We need to take that step back by doing a breathing activity to get us grounded. So that's what breathing activities help ground us in the present, grounds our body, it anchors our body while the emotional storm is going on. And so, a classic one is just breathing from your belly. I think I have that on the next slide. But breathing from your belly is the best way to do it. If you have little kids, teenagers and adults could do this too, but you could have them lay down on the ground, put a stuffy on their belly, and tell them to take the stuffy for a ride. And so then as you breathe in, you want your stomach to expand as if you had a balloon in it. So you're blowing up that balloon. And then as you breathe out, then you want that balloon or your belly to kind of decrease for that. And then in the perfect world, we want the out breath to be a little bit longer than the in breath. And so there's actually a science to it, if you can believe it, that to truly activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our relaxing nervous system to help calm us down, it's the most helpful to breathe from your diaphragm, which is your belly, and then slow it down and have your out breath be a little bit be a little bit longer than your in breath is. So sometimes we'll hear from kids like it doesn't work. 9 times out of 10 is probably because they're not doing it kind of the scientific way. They're just sort of doing it the like, I don't know, TikTok pop way. And there is like some science behind it. And so we're taking this deep breath. And as we're taking this, we can do this at the same time. Like sometimes stop can happen in 30 seconds. So as we're doing this breathing, what's going on? What am I feeling on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe? What I'm having an urge to throw something right now. I'm having an urge to run. And then we want to proceed mindfully. So we want to act with awareness and skill, not impulse. And so we need to think about our goals. What action is going to make this situation better or worse? The question we don't want to focus on is like, what action is going to make my anxiety quiet down? We don't want to answer that. Well, I mean, we could answer it, sure, but we don't want to follow it, right? We want to follow what is going to move me towards my values, what overall in the long term is going to make this situation better, because I don't want to just focus on kind of these next few minutes. So this is just a framework to help us to remember. I practice this. Like I said, I practice this at work. I practice this just in my own life. If I'm even sometimes like driving to work and I'm running late, like this is just a framework that I use for life, really. Because I think it can just be really helpful. You're at the doctor's office and it's been 45 minutes and, you're starting to get agitated or irritated, stop, skill, super helpful for that. So then we're going to talk about just some daily strategies for emotional balance. And some of these you might have heard these before if you've been to any other presentations, but it's just impossible to not talk about these because they're just so important when it comes to anxiety. These are the things that's going to help build like tolerance and help people walk out the door more regulated, more balanced, which is why they're so important. We're also, our next slide is going to talk about some more of like the traditional coping skills that can be very helpful in the moment. But it's these skills that are going to make the huge difference for the rest of their lives if they start to learn these things now as kids. Not that we teach these to our adults too in the Adult Anxiety OC program, but these are things that we want to get started right now that we want to do the rest of our lives. So we want to take care of our body. We want to sleep well. We want to eat well. We want to try to limit mood altering substances. And when I say that, I don't just mean like drug and alcohol. I'm also talking energy drinks. I'm talking caffeine too, just, sometimes sugar. We want to get active with that. Sometimes we'll ask our kids like, if you didn't sleep well, and you're having like an energy drink only for breakfast and you haven't gotten any activity and maybe you forgot to take your meds if you're on any kind of meds, on a scale of 1 to 10, like they might be walking out the door at like a 5. Nothing's even happened. They haven't even done the presentation. They haven't even done the test yet. But we'll say, how do you feel if you're tired, hungry, got too much kind of substances, like let's say caffeine or something in your body? Never feels good. And so then we're walking out the door at a 5 and we haven't even done anything on a scale of 1 to 10. And it's simply just because we're dysregulated. So important. I'm sure, if we were in person right now and I asked the group, like, have you guys ever felt this way? You get maybe more reactive, a little bit more of that irritated tone, more of that reaction. We do that, it's the human body thing. We need to know what's important. I've been talking about this for the last 30 minutes, really, is that we have to, it's about that values. We need to identify the why. So that way the values guide our behaviors, not our emotions. So, what kind of, again, student, friend, teammate do you want to be? Values are things you don't ever cross off a list. Those are goals. Values are things that you're always going to do. So if we're an engaged, committed, responsible person, I can't ever really check that off my list, and so those are the things that we have to identify as a family, as a person, and then making sure that we do that, and so I have a pretty strong value to like responsibility. So when my alarm goes off in the morning, I don't know if there's ever been a day in my 45 years that I've wanted to get up when my alarm goes off, but I get up because I, made a commitment to my work and responsibility to, get my son up and help him through some things. And that's what gets me out of bed, not because I want to. It's because I'm moving towards my values. And so we want these two, and we don't want to just talk about these things when when the anxiety shows up, right? These are all things that we don't have to feel anxious, depressed, nothing. These are things that we can just do to live a full and meaningful life. And so I think this is important. And again, even family values, as a family, what's important to us. Sometimes, not so much lately since my son's 10, but for a little while, my son would be like, well, how come so and so doesn't have to do whatever it might be? And I'm like, well, families are different, and this is our family value. We want to accumulate positive experiences. So we want to make sure that on a daily basis we're balancing and we're doing fun things. And so, some things can be a little bit harder. So if like schoolwork is really hard, what are some things we can do to try to help it a little bit? Like maybe play some music or, make a snack with it, things like that. One of the therapists at my work uses this metaphor of that it's like putting peanut butter on celery. If you're trying to eat healthier, trying to get some vegetables in, you might add some peanut butter to make that celery a little bit better. So accumulate positive experiences, just taking advantage all day long, of the little things that can add up. And so we just call that accumulating positive experiences as much as we can. Sometimes it seems really little things and silly and it doesn't seem worth it, but it makes a difference. Where build mastery, on the other hand, is almost like the opposite a little bit of accumulate positive experiences, is that build mastery is about doing activities that build a sense of competency and accomplishment, which is doing the hard things. So that's doing the speeches, that's doing the homework that's hard. That's maybe being assertive with a peer at school. All the things, getting up in the morning, like that is a way to build mastery. And so it's engaging in meaningful activities, but also building that sense of accomplishment. So then, this is where resilience is going to come back into play, is then, if I know that I can do hard things, then the next time something hard comes up, I have all this evidence that in the last year I've done like 50 hard things, versus if I avoid everything, I have no evidence to know that I can do hard things. And then noticing and naming emotions. And so that's, kind of related to the stop and observing, is that we have to be able to put words to feelings so that we can make it more manageable. We want to label like the physical sensations that's happening in our body, and then, hopefully be able to relate it to that fight or flight so we know why it's happening. So, I'm feeling anxious because I'm supposed to, my son was telling me that for trombone, they're going to go like class to class around the holidays and play holiday music. And he's nervous about it because he's never played in front of anyone other than us and like his band. And so, being able to put some words to what he's feeling. And I think that's what helps normalize it. Yeah, that makes sense. You're going to be anxious. You're going to be presenting in front of your friends or people you don't know, or he's in 5th grade, or like 6th graders and teachers. That makes sense to me that you're going to be anxious. Let's put a word to that. And there may be some physical sensations then that show up along the way because your anxiety wants you to, wants you to be safe, doesn't want you to embarrass yourself, doesn't want you to mess up. Whatever the word, kids might say things like, oh, I'm going to look stupid. And so then, that makes sense. The anxiety kind of perks up. But again, the anxiety is just an advisor. We don't want to do what it says necessarily, unless sometimes we do want to listen to it, right? And so, but most of the time we don't want to listen to it. And so we want to be able to label that, know what's happening, maybe again, try to understand a little bit about what's going on with those physical sensations that can help us. And then we always want to observe without judgment. Everybody experiences things a little bit different. Sometimes as I think adults, we accidentally say things like, that's nothing to worry about. That's nothing to be anxious about. but they are anxious, and that's okay, because again, for whatever reason, their mind is saying, I'm going to get embarrassed, I'm going to look stupid, or no one's going to like me, and that's then why they feel anxious. So if we say like you can't feel that, or they shouldn't feel that, then sometimes they can feel like they're doing something wrong or bad. And so we just want to be able to do it without any judgment. So these are some of the daily strategies. Again, I think everyone on the planet should do these, kids all the way to adults. And this is just going to help us live more fully meaningful lives, be more present in our lives, more engaged in our lives. We're very distracted society right now. And so we want to be able to be more present and engaged in our life. All right. So strategies to tolerate some intense emotions without avoidance, because we don't want to avoid. So our goal, the ultimate goal with school anxiety and refusal is always to stay in the classroom. That is always our goal. So we want to be able to identify some things that they can do, that kids can do. We can every single one of these we teach to our adults too, to help us ride that wave. So if we're sitting in class and something's happening, and the anxiety's perking up, and maybe saying, I should go to the student services, I need to go home. These are some things we can do. And so I kind of put them in some categories. There's a lot more than this, but just to give some of the favorites that our patients like. Our kids, our program is like 7-8-year-olds, then all the way up to adulthood. And so these are their favorites. So the brain puzzles is really helpful for us humans that our brain is overactive. We're thinking, worrying a lot. And so doing things maybe like some sort of puzzle, like a word search, extreme dot to dot, those mazes, or Sudoku or crosswords, counting backwards by threes, something that's going to take some mental effort. So then that way, we're kind of like, if you imagine sort of like a camera lens and a focus, we're trying to focus on this thing. So then maybe the anxiety or the worries get a little quieter. The ABC game is probably the favorite at program. And all that is, it's just picking a theme. So maybe it's like food and then going through the alphabet. So it's like, maybe like apples, bread, cereal, donuts, and just kind of going from A to Z, picking a theme. It could be names, and you're doing like Annabelle, Bethany, Cadence, and you're going through. And the cool thing about the ABC game is that we can do it in our heads. We can bop back and forth. And so this is actually a game that my son and I do when he isn't sleeping well or like can't fall asleep. This is something that we did together, and I would do A, he would do B, I would do C, he would do, and so and so. And then we started to get to the point where he practiced himself, because for some reason it was really uncomfortable for him to like lay in bed and not like immediately fall asleep. So we had to do some work to help him ride that wave out, that it was okay that he didn't fall asleep within 30 seconds. And the ABC game is his favorite for that. And so then grounding, again, I talked a little bit about this with the breathing. Grounding is just the best way to get present, get engaged, get grounded in the environment. Again, because if you imagine sort of this emotional storm, the same way an anchor of a boat anchors the boat during like a thunderstorm. It does nothing to the thunderstorm, right? It anchors the boat to try to steady it and ground it. That's what all of our skills do. So if you're a kid, or even us as adults, sometimes our mind says just none of them work. None of these skills work. I would just question, what do you want them to do? Because the skills don't really like affect the emotional storm as much as it's helpful for us to steady the body and ground ourselves, so then we can ride this wave out and we can survive it. Hopefully that makes sense. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is a great one. It uses your 5 senses, which is always present, and you can do it in any order you want, but 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you touch, and so on. The StarFit stretch is about the mind and body. I don't know if everyone can see me, and my picture's really little actually now that I see myself. But the starfish stretch is what it sounds like. It's stretching your body out as much as you possibly can. So you're kind of standing in like a starfish pose. And what that's for is because when we're in that fight or flight and our mind is getting ready to run or to fight, kind of no matter which stance you are, you're already kind of doing this. Either you're getting ready to run, your shoulders come in, you kind of go down, you're getting ready to run, or you're getting ready to fight. It's the same kind of thing. The anxiety kind of has this same body movement for a lot of people. So if we do the starfish stretch, it's the opposite. And then it's kind of it's our body signaling to our brain like nothing dangerous is happening here. And you can do that in class. You don't have to do it all the way to a starfish stretch. You can just kind of stretch, put your shoulders back, stretch back. We can do it in meetings. They would just think we're stretching. Progressive muscle relaxation is just a way to move to try to help calm our body a little bit. So it's moving from our toes to our head. Just as you tense your toes, breathe on your in breath, tense your toes, and then hold it for a second. And on the out breath, release it. Then move up to your ankles. On the in breath, tense your ankles, hold it, release it, and just keep doing that all the way up. You to your face. That's how you would do that. Sometimes we look a little silly. That's okay. We can look silly. Dropping anchor is really just the idea of dropping down. Because again, a lot of the times, us as humans, kids in particular, will curl up in a ball when we're anxious. Because again, it's that hiding, same idea, whether we're fighting, running, or kind of curled up in a ball. Dropping anchor is just that opening up, feet on the ground, arms maybe on the table or the rest, just opening the self up. And then the 4-7-8 breathing is just kind of like the breathing exercise I did earlier with stop, but it's a reminder to have the out breath be longer than the in breath. So 4-7-8 is just you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 7, and breathe out for 8. And then you can walk your kid through this. You do it yourself. I mean, when Jake's anxious about something, that causes me to be anxious. We might as well just do it together. And then a final one is self-soothe. There's just a lot of research out there that shows that self-soothe can be really helpful with anxiety. And really this is unlimited kind of ideas. It's using your 5 senses, and everyone's different. It's a very subjective thing of whatever it would be that would be helpful. So like song lyrics, maybe fidgets. This is where all the fidgets come from, but we got to do it mindful. We can't just play with things not mindfully. It won't work if we do that. So those are just some skills that we could do. There's a lot more. And then just some quick things about how we as parents can help the process with school, because we want to collaborate with the school staff, and perhaps if we have an outpatient therapist. So the first thing we want to do though is validate our kids, and then coach. So we can say, I know this feels hard, and let's take this one step together. We want to reinforce that effort, that courage, that resiliency, the willingness to do hard things, not reinforce just feeling good and feeling comfortable. Sometimes moving towards your values doesn't feel good. Modeling that we can do hard things. We don't have to hide that from our kids. I think sometimes society tells us as parents that we're supposed to hide that. We don't have to do that, because we can be a good role model, show them how we can cope, show them how we can problem solve, how we can show up, and have them watch us do that and know that it's okay, because we're going to be that way. Encourage small steps versus perfection. We can step it up. Again, courage and resilience comes after doing hard things, not the other way around. We want to keep the long view. So oftentimes the long term is growth, short term is distress often. We want to create predictable routines to reduce the uncertainty and power struggles. So that's getting in that sleep hygiene routine. I know it's hard. I know that kids will give you 17 reasons of why it's okay to have their phone or their tablet in their room. I wouldn't do it. I think there should be a station at the kitchen, and they just don't even tempt them. And then you can collaborate. So then my last slide is really just some books that I really like. So the left side are the workbooks that are a little bit more geared towards the kids. And then the right side are more parenting books. I know that one of the titles is The Explosive Child, which sounds really intense, but really that just means like a kid that might be like easily frustrated or inflexible, and it's an awesome book. And then so is the other one. Push.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kohler.
Yeah, you're welcome.
At this time, I would like to introduce the IPSD 204 panel. To have a well-rounded discussion of this topic, we invite staff members from all levels and from different schools. So on with us tonight, we have Jill Keller. She is the principal at Georgetown Elementary School. We have Sarah Lies. She is the SEL or Social Emotional Learning Coach at McCarty Elementary. Renice Ward, School Social Worker at Gombert Elementary. Tondalea White, the Assistant Principal at Scullin Middle School. Lori Strong, she's the school counselor at Still Middle School. And Amanda Pizek, our mental health coordinator at Mattia Valley High School. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share some of the questions that were submitted through our registration, and we're going to try to answer them from the different level perspectives and go through some of the things that you were wondering about. So the first question, from an academic perspective, how can I talk to my child about the ripple effect that avoiding difficult subjects or tasks can cause? For example, wanting to miss school to avoid a test or a hard assignment that they do not understand. So how do I explain the ripple effect to them from an academic standpoint?
Hi, this is Lori from Still Middle School. What I like to do with my students is try to explain to them that it's kind of a catch-22, because yes, maybe in that exact moment, maybe you don't have to face that hard test or avoid having to turn in homework or something that maybe you didn't do. But then the problem is that just piles upon everything else. So you're missing a day of school, you're missing assignments. You didn't take the test, so now you have to take it at a different time, and perhaps during that time you might be missing out on something else. So it just is that ripple effect, that catch-22, where it seems good in the moment, but overall it's just actually going to lead to more stress, because now you're going to have makeup work and a makeup test and other things to do on top of the regular work that you already are going to have from just your regular school day.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Jill Keller from Georgetown. I think we work with our elementary students a lot on cause and effect and kind of processing through some of those emotions. And so what's the worst thing that might happen if we struggle with this test? We'll retake the test. We can do that. We can get through that. And kind of processing through what some of those fears are, I think is really important. And like Laura said, making sure that they're able to face that and take that first step so that they are able to be continuously successful.
Hi, this is Sarah Lies, SEL coach at McCarty. I just was going to tack on to what Jill said, that I do a lot of role playing with kids. As she just said, just kind of talk through the what if scenarios, just take it to that next step with I'm at elementary level. So even with the little ones, playing out a role play sometimes helps them just kind of gauge what would happen with the what ifs.
Hi, this is Dr. White from Scullin Middle School. One of the things that's a struggle is that when you're dealing with middle school and elementary school students, sometimes they do not have the capacity to understand that ripple effect. They only understand the right here and right now. So they don't have the ability like a high school student might be able to, see what happens in, freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. So when you're dealing with the little ones, it's a little bit more challenging, and the challenge is getting them to understand or connect it to something else. Like Laura was saying, that her son might like playing music or like other activities, and giving them the idea that the more you practice, the better you get. So when you're not going to school or you're not doing that assignment, that ripple effect is that it's going to train your brain to think that you cannot do it. But the more you do it, the more you're going to build that strength in your brain. You're going to build that skill, whatever activity it is, and then it makes you to do better. So it's real. Sometimes we talk to our kids, even when they're younger, as if they're older, but they sometimes don't have that capacity to see that ripple effect. So we have to connect it to something else. It might even be video games. If you want to learn how to get better at whatever game you have, you work at it, you do it more, you don't avoid it, and you get better at it. If not, then you're not going to move through the levels.
Hi, this is Renee Ward from elementary school. I agree with everything that my colleagues have said. I also say working at the elementary level, we use a lot of visual tools there. So use of contingency maps and kind of mapping out for students what the expectation is and what the consequences are of that, both positive and negative, can help them kind of see for themselves a little bit more and just give them a visual in order to do that.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. Thank you. And this question is probably look very different depending on the level. But somebody said, what should I do if my child is refusing to get on the bus or in the car? Or if they agree to go to school, but when we arrive, will not get out of the car? So from a school perspective, what should be the next steps? And how can the school support that?
This is Amanda Pizek from Matia Valley. At the high school level, I think for our kids, usually they are not getting in the car to come. And if they're getting in the car, they have the intent in getting on the building, getting into our building, but it's just that initial step of, is it passing period? Who am I going to see? So in my role, I would say a social worker or counselors have done a great job at meeting students at the door, maybe meeting students at a door that's not so busy, maybe meeting students at a non-passing period, inviting students into our office to kind of do a soft start to their day. So maybe they just need to come in, they need to talk, they need to just have a moment to kind of do some deep breathing or do some of the skills that you talked about, Dr. Kohler. And so we can really work with students to offer them just that space that they may need to just kind of calm their nerves, take a couple deep breaths, and then we can work with them to get to class, to get to where they need to go. For the students who are just blatantly refusing to come to school and to come to the building, we've had a lot of discussions with then what are the consequences at home? And are they on their cell phones? Are they allowed to play video games? Are they allowed to go out after school? Because not coming to school means you're sick. It's a sick day. So you shouldn't be on your video games. You shouldn't be having fun with your friends after school. You shouldn't be able to go to you can't come to your after school activities if you're absent. So you shouldn't be going to any other activities outside of school if you're absent. So it should truly be treated as a sick day. And students shouldn't be allowed, being at home shouldn't be an enjoyable time for them when they're not at school because their responsibility is to be at school. So that's just my perspective from high school.
I would say the middle school perspective is very, very similar to what Amanda was saying. We definitely would have the same approach to helping the student get into the building. The same thing, trying to have them come in during a time where they feel comfortable, like during a passing period, having them come to like my office or one of the other counselors or social workers' office to, problem solve how we are going to get into class and help them feel more comfortable and then get them into the classroom. And the same thing, we do have lots of conversations with parents about if they, outright refuse to come to school, that yes, it should not be seen as, oh yeah, I get this free day at home to just, play video games or be on my phone or do things like that, that it should be treated as if you are home on a sick day, it's very serious. You are not at school where they should be.
I agree with my colleagues. Understanding that school refusal is often a stress response, not a defiance. Mm-hmm. That sometimes, they want to be normal. They want to go to school. They want to do it, but something is prohibiting. Like Laura said, it's a defense mechanism. It's something that is going on inside of them that they can't. And it also, it's like a habit. The more you miss school, the easier it becomes to miss school. Mm-hmm. So I agree with my colleagues when they say that one can't make being at home more attractive than being at school. If we had the choice to be at home and, hang out with our loved ones and watch movies and all of those things, then of course we'll choose that over doing something hard. Also, having a person that they connect with and meet with every day and have that conversation of breaking down that day of what is it that you're afraid of? What is it that you're afraid of? What part of the day is hard? What is it that you're afraid that you're going to have a barrier with? What are we going to do if that happens? Also, never ask a kid, do they want to go to school? Because when you ask that, that's a yes or no question, and you set yourself up for failure, because it's like you said, you asked, like my 5-year-old granddaughter, but you asked, Mimi. And then when we're like, that's not what I wanted you to say, then we come into a cycle where we're talking too much, and that talking increases their anxiety versus using short phrases that we're going to go to school. What do you need for us to do in order to help you? Have that safe person at school that they can check in with and check out with. Go to your first and second class. And if you need a break and you need to come to my office, you can chat, we can talk, but I'm going to reset. I'm going to get you back to class. It's not a place where you're going to be able to stay all day, but having those conversations with students and letting them know that you have a safe person, check in with them. And if you need to check with them throughout the day, that's fine. But know that the goal is always to get you back into the classroom.
And anything from elementary?
Yeah, I think from elementary, certainly we would do very similar things, meeting them at the door, making sure that they have trusted people. But I think anytime we can make something really enjoyable, whether that's a game or a challenge or things that feel really exciting, that can sometimes trick their brain out of that anxiety cycle. And so things like, we're going to carpool with a friend today. It's going to be a little bit different than our normal arrival, or we're going to go in a different door and we're going to see how many friends we meet on the way, because now we're taking a different way to our classroom. I can't wait to hear how many friends you bumped into on the way to your classroom. And these different kind of challenges that we can give them. Now I have something else to focus on, and I'm going into school looking for things that are enjoyable as opposed to focusing on what's making me nervous. I think, again, that it's taking that first step and making sure that they can get in the door and understand that there isn't something there that is really scary.
All right, thank you, Jill. Another question, it goes along with what we've been talking about, and I've seen several versions of this question. My high school student, although I did see some younger parents ask this question too, stays up late and then struggles to wake up in the morning. And then they're tired and they don't want to go to school. How involved should parents be with enforcing those routines versus letting them learn from the natural consequences?
All right, Amanda from Matia. I think that's a twofold question, because I think both parents have some responsibility in trying to get our students to bed early and try to emphasize the importance of getting a good night's sleep, making sure, as everyone mentioned, our cell phones are docked, our gaming devices are not on after a certain time, and that there's some rules at home, and children know that, hey, bedtime and game time and social media time ends at this time every night. And so trying to enforce that is really going to help our high school kiddos. And then I think they also need to face the consequences of when they're not getting up and coming to school on time and they're not going to class on time. Eventually, they're going to get to the point where those become truancies. And so they're going to get involved with their dean, and they may get consequences for that. Eventually, they're not going to be able to make up work in their classes. And that's scary, because I hear you as a parent, you're like, oh, but I don't want their grade to be impacted. But until they really see, like, oh gosh, that was an unexcused absence, and I had a quiz that day that now I have to take a 0 on. If grades are motivating and their academics are motivating, that in itself will get them back into the classroom. So let them have those consequences. Obviously, we have 5 mental health days. So students, you can have that conversation of, hey, when you're really struggling and you need to take a mental health day or come in late for mental health reasons, not because you're up late on the phone or gaming, but because you're up late doing homework, studying for a test, or feeling overwhelmed. Like, we have those days in place for students. But when they're abused and then they've gone over their limit on days and now it's really impacting their academics, they really need to face the consequences of the decisions that they made. That's, I feel like, the only way that and that's life, right? What we talked about, if we don't go to work every day, if we don't get up on time every day, there are consequences for that. And high school is the very appropriate time to let those natural consequences happen, especially for our kids who are thinking four-year college and moving out of our homes in a few years. We want them to understand the importance of getting up and following a schedule. So
thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. I want to make sure that we get to it. There were several questions that asked about what if the school anxiety or school refusal comes from peer conflicts. The question was specifically asked from a middle school parent who's saying that their child's trying to avoid the lunchroom specifically. But I think we can look at it from all levels in terms of what if there is peer conflict, teasing, having issues with the students in your classroom, feeling like you don't fit in or belong, and that peer piece is the reason that you're avoiding school. Do we want to jump in?
I can just speak from the high school end really quickly. There is a lot of freedom at the high school. So if the lunchroom is overwhelming and loud, if there are the LMC, there are blended areas, there are offices, students can become pass runners. So they have a lot of options in our building for some autonomy to go where there's a courtyard. Seniors have off-campus lunch. So there's a lot of ways to alleviate some of those stressful areas. As far as the bullying and stuff goes, they really need to talk with their dean. I know it's difficult for kids to come forward, but those peer issues are addressed and they will continue to be addressed. There are no contact orders that can be put in place. We take those things very seriously. So really encourage families, if students are really feeling that high level of bullying, to please reach out to your student's dean and house team. And they will do things to make sure your student is feeling comfortable and safe at school.
May I also add, when it becomes a safety issue, you have to have certain strategies in order to deal with conflict. And everyone's not going to be your friend. You don't need to have 20 different friends. All you need is 1 or 2 good friends. And working with your student to understand the difference between everyone's not going to like you, but we all need to work in the same space. However, when it becomes a safety concern, don't wait until 3, 4, 8, 10 incidences happen in order to report it and let it be known. So we have to know about it. The school has to know about what happens in order to help mediate those situations. Also, you also have to, a lot of students are concerned about snitching. And they won't tell that there's a problem or a situation. And we have to break that cycle, because there's a difference between snitching and holding someone accountable. If someone is bullying you and mistreating you, you need to have that courage in order to say, hey, this is a concern, and a person does not have the right to treat me, in an ill way. But when we continue that, I don't want to tell, my daughter or my son doesn't want anyone to know about it. Well, it's hard for us to address the situation in a meaningful way if we have to be vague and we cannot address it. So, I would say, let the adults in the building know, give your child some strategies, and have the courage to face it and have people accountable for mistreating you. They don't get a chance to get away with it. I tell a student, if someone stole your bike, would you tell, or would you say, well, that's snitching, I don't want them to get in trouble, right? You would tell because you want your bike back. You want them to be accountable for what happened. The same way as if they're bullying you, then you want them to be accountable for it. Also, cyberbullying, the connections, the Instagrams, it's almost an addiction that they can't turn it off. They have to disconnect and block and get away from those social media sites or those group chats. Like I tell our students that there's absolutely no group chat or Instagram that Scullin Middle School takes and supports. So when you get invited into these group chats, you don't even know these students, you don't even know these kids, and it always turns out negative when your child be in a room of 30 middle schoolers or high schoolers without supervision. But that's what these things are. So working with your students to, get off that social media. If you don't know them, don't friend them. If something comes up, let an adult know.
And any thoughts from elementary?
Dawn, I would just say, in terms of elementary, our students are, even though maybe the students have talked to their parents about it at home, I would just make sure that the parents are communicating with school staff, because even though we think maybe our students are coming to school and sharing, that doesn't always happen. So I think that communication is just so important at the elementary, all levels, but especially for the little ones.
All right. Well, thank you to Dr. Kohler. Thank you to our 204 panel. And thank you to all the parents that joined us for this evening. We're going to go ahead and stop there and enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you very much.